What's going on, world? Welcome to another edition of the Black Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Reg. Joined today with me is another very special guest. This been an interview in the making for a while. I had bad connection the last time, so y'all were probably been supposed to get this interview maybe a few weeks ago, but we here now. I want to say happy belated birthday because around that time you had just celebrated your birthday. Introduce yourself. Tell a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. So my name is Latisha Carr. Most people either know me by that or by Tish. So I'm a life coach and I'm a self-care strategist. And my background in mental health is actually, and I think I shared this before, but I'll share it again, that I have a degree in psychology. I have a master's degree in counseling. And I really got into the mental health realm because of a couple of things. One, my mother has a severe mental illness. My mother actually has schizophrenia, depends on who you ask, maybe schizoaffective disorder, but she definitely hears voices, so we'll go with that. But so growing up, my experience with mental health came from that perspective of being the child of a person with a serious mental illness and kind of seeing the needs and seeing the lack of mental health help that people of color got. So I went to college, got my degree in psychology, got my degree in counseling, and then I decided I didn't want to be a therapist after all of that. I'm a person that likes to have the information and know the things, but I don't necessarily have to be doing the work. So I'm really grateful for that experience. I worked in mental health for about 4.5 years. I worked in a mental health program, a dual recovery program. So my clients had mental health diagnosis as well as substance abuse diagnosis. And I moved on from that to crisis work. So I was a residential treatment coordinator for a crisis program. Then I moved on to work part-time for the mobile crisis team. And I still do that here and there. They'll call me in and ask me to come in to do that kind of thing. So I'm still very much connected to the mental health world and kind of seeing the things that are going on in the community and those kind of things. But for my work that I do now, I work with people who don't necessarily have mental health issues. They are people who have goals and visions and things that they're getting stuck in. So I've done that for a while, and now I'm focused more on the self-care aspect and helping entrepreneurs build self-care into the foundation of their life and into their businesses, because we know when you're not taking care of yourself, your business is not going to go well either. And so I believe, broken people build broken businesses, right? So helping people to really create healthy foundations within their business. And that starts with ourselves, and that starts through self-care. So that's a little bit about me as quick as I can.
You dropped a lot of gems. We're gonna walk through it. That last one was good. Broken people build broken businesses. That's a quote. But to go back, I guess, to childhood, how was the experience to dealing more about with your mom, and like what was that? Because like, what would you say to that little girl that's going through that today?
So I would say it was very stressful. I don't have the right words. It's hard to describe to other people that experience, because it's like I've met other people now that I'm an adult. I've met other people who have parents with serious mental illnesses, but as a child, I didn't have any friends that had that experience. I didn't really have that many people to talk to. So very early on, I learned how to keep a lot of stuff to myself, which is why I ended up having to go to therapy for a while as an adult, because I learned to keep a shell around me, because there was things that felt like needed to be a secret. When I was a kid, my grandmother actually raised me, but my mom was in the household most of the time. I would say probably 70% of the time. And it was just like, I remember my grandmother saying things, sorry, I'm in my car, so hopefully the noise doesn't bother you guys, but my grandmother saying things like, she was concerned that if that people would think that I was unsafe or something like that if my mom was there, and like, and just like small things. She never told me like not to say anything to someone, but just small things like that was like, okay, this needs to be a secret. What happens in this house stays in this house, kind of thing, even though those words weren't actually used. So my experience was kind of lonely, I guess would be the word, really. even though my friends knew my mom and my friends knew the situation, and they were very like, my actual friends never like teased me about it or were mean about it. They loved my mom. They like didn't really have an issue with her mental health issues, I guess. And they look, to this day, my friends still be like, oh, I saw your mom and this was going on. Is she okay? And, still checking in on her and that kind of thing. But yeah, I would say that experience was fairly lonely because it's not like I had the same experience as my friends who had different relationships with their mom. So it was tough as a kid.
What advice would you give to yourself at that age right now, at your age you are now?
If I were given, I wouldn't necessarily give this advice to myself. I would give this advice to my grandmother and to my aunt who raised me. Take that girl to therapy because she has some stuff she needs to talk about that she can't necessarily talk to y'all about because y'all are biased, right? Because my grandmother, that's her child, right? That's her daughter. So she had her own stuff about it. My aunt, that's her sister. They had experiences with my mom before the mental illnesses. They knew they knew her before that. I didn't have that experience. So I would tell my family to put me as a child into therapy earlier on in life. And I don't think that they would have been resistant to that. I just don't think that that was like something that was top of mind at the time. So that would be the advice I would give my family. And to myself, I would say, you're not as alone as you think you are. And you can talk to your family about it. And, they do understand in their own way, they do understand. So yeah, I think that would be my biggest. Now I'm going through my head of like things I talk to my therapist about. Of like, these are the things I would advise that person. Like, you don't have to be in your shell. You don't have to hide.
So what made you, all right, so you went to school, you was able to see the different aspects of like mental health and stuff in your community, stuff in your life. What made you pick out the self-care aspect of it?
Yeah, so that actually came to me pretty naturally. So when I remember in grad school, we had to do self-care plans, and I was fascinated by those for whatever reason. And I didn't really think too much about it. I just was like, oh, like this is really good. And when I was doing my internship, I was working with children and teenagers, and I would have them do self-care plans. I would have the teenagers do self-care plans, before they were sent home or whatever. I worked at a psych hospital for children and teenagers, and I would have them do self-care plans. And for some reason, I just cared about doing these self-care plans. And that's really kind of probably what was like the trigger point for that. And then just going through the work that I was doing and my family situation, I realized very early on in my working career that I was feeling burnt out and I hated my job. And my job was stressful, but I like hated it so much. It was so ridiculous. But what was happening was I was allowing myself to say yes to all these things at work, and then going home. And at the time, I still lived with my mom and my aunt, and having to deal with my mom's stuff. And I wasn't taking care of myself. And I realized that. And what actually happened was I was about to quit my job, and I wasn't prepared to quit my job at that time. And my boss said, well, we can give you a vacation. Like, they love me, so they wanted me to stay on. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this vacation. And I just like ducked off and went to the Dominican Republic with my cousin. Didn't tell anybody. It was like this secret trip I went on. And I came back and I had a couple more days off because I took a very long. I took like 15 days off. And I, just took some time to myself. And I was like, you know what? I do feel better, but I need to set boundaries. And I need to set boundaries at work, and I need to set boundaries at home. And that really has been what I preach to other people a lot. When I'm talking to entrepreneurs, when I'm talking to other professionals, my conversation is about what are your boundaries in your business? What are your boundaries in your career? And is that why you're feeling burnt out? So that's kind of how I got into that. It really came pretty natural to me. I've always been an advocate that people deserve to live their best life, whatever it looks like to them, and not necessarily what looks good for Instagram. When you're burnt out, a hot bath and that sounds good, but might not be what you need. You need boundaries, So you got to go a little deeper than the stuff that you see on social media about self-care. Like a vacation is cool, but do you have some people end up needing a vacation from the vacation. So do you have a plan in place to help you deal with that? So it just came really natural to me, and I'm very passionate about people living their best true life. And at this point in time, that looks like creating refill plans and creating self-care plans for people in their life and in their business.
You talked about boundaries, and one of my last episode or my previous episodes, I'll ask you the same question that I asked the young lady, and it was basically, I have a friend who wants to start setting boundaries and like to protect their well-being and their process, their mental process. But what happens when you set those boundaries for family members who are not receptive of that? Like, how do you can't just cut those relationships off. Those people who have been around you. Like, it's not easy, I should say. You can, but it's not easy. What advice, what knowledge, what experience can you give to people?
This portion of the podcast was brought to you by Speak to My Soul. Speak to My Soul hosts events, creates production, and incorporates programs in the community that uses the performing arts to empower, educate, and elevate. They raise the awareness of pressing issues in the community such as poverty, injustice, unemployment, education, or lack thereof, etc. People of all ages and backgrounds have been inspired after their programs have spoken to their souls through empowering messages, presentations, acting, and spoken word. These features continue to speak across generations and socio-economic statuses, impacting and changing lives. Speak to My Soul was created by Avita Cologne. She was on episode 9 of the podcast, and you guys got to hear her story. If not, go back and listen. And she's just doing things to elevate and empower the community through her arts of music, spoken word, just any way to help. So go check her out, and I'm always happy to support. This episode is also brought to you by the Urban Social Scientists. When two dope, unapologetic black social scientists get together, they create, research, assess, and discuss foundational black American triumphs, trials, tribulations, and more. It ain't your basic black podcast. They speak truth to power. I can tell you guys firsthand experience that I listened to a few of these ladies' episodes, and they are giving out like phenomenal life changing information, and not in the sense of like motivational, but just educating people. I learned so much on there, and the different intricacies that you don't know that's going on that's affecting our community. And you guys know I'm big for our community. So go check them out. Give them a subscribe. It's free. Give them a listen and tell them Reg sent you.
Be consistent with your boundaries. People don't respect boundaries because they're not used to boundaries. I don't want to say specifically in the Black culture. I don't know if that's true. I think that that's probably just true across like our society in America. It's like people don't respect boundaries, period. So I would say if you're consistent with your boundaries, people will get used to them. Because for me, I had to tell my aunt, my aunt will call me all day long. She does not care that I have work to do. And it's not like she's being rude about it. It's just like her day is kind of more free. So she's like, oh, let me call Tish and ask her, blah, blah, blah. And I had to say to her when I was working and I was like stressed out at that time when I was ready to quit my job, I was like, okay, don't call me after 6 unless it's an emergency. I mean, don't call me before 6 unless it's an emergency. I'm not available. I'm at work from 10 to 6. So after 6 you can call me, but also don't call me after 10 p.m. Like call me between 6 and 10 because after 10, my aunt's the type of person that wants to tell me a long story, and usually it's not a good story. It's not like, oh, this great thing happened. It's like, oh, let me tell you about all the drama that's going on, right? And that's cool. And sometimes it's like, okay, I needed to know that. But I'm like, all right, girl, I can't hear that at 10 o'clock at night when I'm about to go to sleep. And now I got what my cousin such and such is doing down the street on my mind. So I had to set that boundary with her. And I just had to keep saying it. And even though it was comfortable to hear her be like, okay. And like, it felt like to me that she may have been feeling like I didn't care about her day or didn't care about what she had going on. I had to be like, okay, you also have to care about your own boundaries enough to set them. So when you're consistent with them, people will eventually get it, that you're
Mm-hmm.
serious. And be reasonable with your boundaries. I guess that's one thing. There's a difference from being like having boundaries and being a jerk, right? Like you don't have to be a jerk to people, but you have to communicate what your boundaries are. You can't just be like, okay, I've decided that I'm not answering the phone or I'm not talking to people after 10 p.m. and don't communicate that to people. Because then it's like, if you've been answering my calls all this time,
Mm-hmm.
after 10 p.m., all of a sudden you stop answering, I'm thinking there's an issue. You have
Right.
to communicate with people what your boundaries are and communicate why those are your boundaries. And people will either get used to it or they'll get mad, but you still have to be consistent in that. So I would say communicate and be consistent in what your boundaries are. And people will eventually get it. And then they may set their own boundaries too. Like you have to lead by example, especially in our families that aren't used to boundaries, or even in our workplace. I worked in a place where nobody had boundaries. Like they just did not have boundaries. And I was like, this is weird that y'all don't like that y'all want to go hang out after work all the time. We're already, I'm just like, I'm not coming. And they would finally get it. Like, I'm only coming out to happy hour with my coworkers on Friday nights, period. And maybe not even that. Like, it's like setting boundaries is like, you got to do that in every aspect of
Your life.
your life. You can't just do it in one place, because once someone sees that gap, they'll be like, oh, she lets this happen. She lets this happen, and they'll try to
Take
push
advantage.
So that's my personal experience, and kind of when people ask me that, I say the same thing. Make sure you're very clear on your boundaries. You communicate them with others, and that you stay consistent in them. Because the first time that you are like, okay, let me, I'm using answering the phone as an example, but let me answer this call. It's like, oh, she answered at 12 o'clock at night this time, just so we can chit chat. Then why wouldn't she do it the next time?
Mm-hmm.
And and also being clear, like, okay, I'm not saying don't ever call me after 10, but don't call me if it's not an emergency, or don't call me if what I'm saying, like, don't just be calling me to chit chat at 12 o'clock at night.
Right. No, that's true. That is true. So with you being a woman and a black woman, it's it kind of not ironic is not the word I'm looking for, but you guys are the most giving people out there.
Mm-hmm.
So isn't it harder for women to practice self-care because they're so used to like being there for their kids, being there for their man, being just being there for everyone, but not being there for themselves? Like I'm pretty sure it's probably a rough transition at first because they're so used to a certain way of doing things.
Definitely. I think that it can be very difficult. And that goes back to the boundaries conversation. It's very difficult to set boundaries when you have children to take care of, you have, family and all these other things going on. But that goes back to the consistency. And I've been teaching the moms that I've worked with, if you teach your kids about self-care and boundaries early on, it goes back to the consistency and communicating thing, even with your children. They'll get it. And if you make them a part of it, it it makes it like a family thing. Like my family has boundaries, like my family does self-care day. My goddaughter's grandmother actually lets them take a lazy day from school. And my grandmother used to do that with me too. She would be like, as long as your grades are good, once every 6 weeks or whatever, you could take a day off of school just because, not because you were sick or anything like that. It's just a lazy day.
Right.
They call it a lazy day. When I was younger, I would just be like, Grandma, I don't want to go to school. And she'd be like, okay, girl. But they get to call it a lazy day. And I think that that's awesome, because that essentially is a mental health day, right? They don't call it that, but essentially that's what that is. And that's teaching them like, okay, as long as I'm doing my work and keeping up with what I'm supposed to do, I can take a break and have a day to myself. And so if you teach that to your kids early on, and you can do that in different ways, it doesn't have to look like having a lazy day from school. It could be, on Sundays, we rest, right? We don't do a lot of stuff on Sundays. You can teach those things within your family in a very organic way. Maybe Saturday is your day that the whole family goes to the movies, or like, something that's a fun day, or like, and having like a name for it and teaching that within your family. And that makes that transition feel less like for us, I guess for women, we feel selfish when we are
Mm-hmm.
taking care of ourselves first. But if we're communicating that and setting that as the standard within our families, and with our loved ones, then it doesn't feel like that. At least in my experience, it doesn't feel like that, because it's like, okay, this is what we do as a family, or mommy has this day,
Mm-hmm.
auntie has this day to herself, and if it's communicated well, it works out. So that's my personal opinion and my experience, vicarious experience, because I don't have kids, but my vicarious experience is that when you communicate and you build that into your routine within your family, it can work out.
Okay. Well, let's talk about one that I know you probably have experience in: self-care and relationships.
Oh,
How how does that happen? Like, what's your experience with that? And I know you probably touched upon it with setting boundaries and being clear with communication. But like, what is your experience with self-care and relationships?
same thing. Communicate and consistency. Like, if you let the people that you're dating, or you're in a relationship with, know in advance, like, this is how I get down, and how I get down to self-care, they get with it. And my experience is that men love when women come up with these kind of things on the low, because they're like, oh, like, okay, she got her day and I can go do what I want, and hang with my boys, or whatever my self-care day looks like. Or I can use this, men will use that kind of stuff to, like, oh, it's like my golf day, this is my basketball day, like, whatever self-care looks like for them. So for me, it's, again, communicating, being consistent, and then just kind of making it a part of your relationship. I was dating a guy, and I would explain to him, and at first he thought I was crazy, and then he understood why later. He was like, I don't do this anymore, but I used to, when I was still working my 9 to 5. Every, like, third weekend of the month was just, like, to myself. Like, I'm not going out. I'm just relaxing, resting. Now, you could be around me, but you also need to be resting, because if you're moving around and doing a lot while I'm resting, I'm going to be annoyed. So you can either get with it or go somewhere. And he was like, what? I'm like, every third weekend, like, I need my time to myself. Like, that's how I refill. That's, like, what I need. And he didn't get it at first. And then he was like, oh, you know what? This actually makes a lot of sense. Like, we're not running around. Like, so communicate in those, again, it just really goes back to communicating the boundaries, and communicating the intention, and communicating what this does for me, and what this could potentially do for you too, if it works for your personality type. The way I do things and the way I do self-care might be different from a person who is more extroverted and how they do self-care.
Right.
I'm an introvert naturally, so I like to be alone, versus someone who wants to, like, go out and go see a movie and be around people and that kind of thing. That could be self-care for them. So yeah, again, communication.
All right. So you spoke of it earlier, but like, broken people build broken businesses. I wanted you to dive more deep into that, because you work with entrepreneurs in your line of work. So what have you found with, like, self-care pertaining to mental health with entrepreneurs and the stuff that they have going on?
Hey, before we get into that part of the episode, I just wanted to tell you that this part of the episode is brought to you by You Good Man, hashtag You Good Man. You Good Man is a free opportunity for boys and men of all ages to come together and have real conversation about wellness. This is a safe space where we can explore manhood, femininity, fatherhood, relationships, our mental health, and everything in between. The goal is to improve wellness for men in the black community. The host of it, the founder, is Phil Roundtree, who is a mental health professional. He also is the host of the You Good Men podcast, which is dedicated to discussing men's wellness across the areas of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness. I had a chance to join Phil and the rest of a couple guys at his group sessions, and I'm telling you guys, it's a phenomenal space. I try to bring as much value to my listeners as much as possible. And if you're in the Philadelphia region, this is definitely a space that you should be in, especially if you're a man. You are able to get your feelings out and not be judged, and I feel like it's just what he says. It's a safe space for you to come and discuss your feelings. So I had a wonderful time. I'm trying to get back there, but recovery from the accident, I'm not making it. But Phil, if you hear this, man, I'm gonna be through it. I just want to show you some love by putting you on the podcast and getting your brand. I'm always here to do anything that I can to help out with everything going on. So Check him out. He has the podcast, he has the group session, he has a bunch of other things, merch, everything. So check him out when you guys get a chance. And thank you for supporting him. Now let's get back to the show. This portion of the podcast is also brought to you by Black Men Heal. Heal Men, Heal Men. Black Men Heal is excited to share with you a new organization specifically targeting black men. They are currently offering 8 free sessions to local men of color in the Philadelphia area by qualified therapists of color who volunteer to donate 8 hours over a duration of 2 months. In exchange, the men will have to commit to sharing and discussing their experience with 8 other black men that they identify with. I was able to participate in Black Men Hill. Phenomenal experience, man. I was able to meet my therapist George, and we still have a phenomenal relationship today. And it helped me a whole lot in a whole ordeal. So, if you're in the Philadelphia region, check them out. They always have new sessions going on. So you may not be in this cohort, but you can always get into the next one. So check out blackmanhill.org when you get a chance.
Yeah, so I have had some people who are very, very busy, have flourishing businesses, flourishing podcasts, flourishing everything, and they just felt so tired of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, it's sad when you get tired of the thing that you've been so passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I communicate with them again is the importance of refilling yourself on a consistent basis, being able to say, okay, my business is flourishing, yes, all these great things are happening, but is this sustainable? Is this scalable? Am I able to take this to the next level? Do I need to hire people on so that I'm not responsible for every single thing? And so sometimes self-care and refilling looks a lot different in business than it does on a one-on-one basis, but it's still the same principles behind it. Sometimes you do have to hire a team so that you're not the solopreneur doing every single thing. And if you can't afford that, then you have to look at, okay, how can I outsource some of this stuff? I know for me, I got very burnt out last year from entrepreneurship because of the everyday up and down of entrepreneurship. Every single day is different. Sometimes you're like, it's like that meme, right? It's like, you know, in the morning you're like, yes, I love
Mm-hmm.
this. Then you're like,
Go
oh my
down.
God, I suck at this. I'm
Then you go back
failing.
up.
This is the worst. Then you're back up and then you're back down, right? And that's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like emotionally and spiritually exhausting. And so for entrepreneurs, we have the highest rate of burnout across the board. We have like some of the highest rates of burnout because we're doing so much, pouring so much out of ourselves versus people who are professionals and may work for someone. They have someone to at least tell them, okay, this is what I expect of you. This is how you're going to get paid. This is when you're going to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Our experiences aren't always like that. And even for people who work for themselves within their business and their experience are like that, it's still like creatively you have to pour out a lot, or or just time wise you have to pour out differently than someone who works a 9 to 5. And so we have to adjust what our days look like, and we have to adjust, like, okay, I need to stop, take an inventory of my energy. For me, I know that I work best later in the day, like like when it's quiet at night, I'm like on it. I'm not a morning person, so I'm not about to be like Eric Thomas and be up at 4 in the morning. If I'm up at 4 in the morning, it's because I've been up like into 4 in the morning and I'm going to sleep soon. Versus the person who works a lot better, like first thing as soon as they wake up. I'm not that person. So for me, my self-care plan looks like, okay, I'm not alert enough to do this kind of work early in the morning, so I'll work out at that time instead, and then go have my breakfast and then start my day that way. I don't talk to people until after 10 a.m. Like I don't want to have a conversation about anything serious before 10 a.m. because I'm just not alert enough to really have that conversation. And so some of it is knowing yourself and being able to adjust to that. But if you're like totally broken down and totally, burnt out, tired, your business is going to reflect that in so many different ways. like I use examples of like Rick Ross. I use Rick Ross as my example all the time because you remember he was having all those seizures and stuff at one point. That comes from a lack of sleep. That comes from, you know, there may be, you know, some other issues going on with him, but a lack of sleep will do that to you. A lack of eating properly or eating at proper times will do that to you. Like all these different things that we take for granted, you know, grind can really run you into the ground. So you have to be able to say, okay, I'm not taking care of myself right now. And if I'm not taking care of myself, how is my business gonna flourish? You know, if you don't have a team of people, your business can't flourish if you're not doing well. If you're sick and in the hospital because you've been having seizures or because you are dehydrated or whatever the case may be, what's happening with your business? Even if you have automation and all these different workflows going on, you still need to be a part of your business. So we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, because honestly, at this point, the way the economy is, it looks like entrepreneurship is the way to go. So if that's going to be the case, we have to learn how to adjust ourselves to that lifestyle and not like let the lifestyle adjust us.
Ooh.
That was a gem. That felt good.
Yeah, that
I ain't never said that out loud.
You dropped so many of them. Pick them all up. Like you dropped so many of them. But you also talked about what was the question? Oh, off air. We talked about my accident. Everybody that's been following me, they know what I've been through with the car accident. You shared a similar story as well. What I've been struggling with, which you can probably help me out with, like mending and still figuring it out, was because the accident happened out of nowhere. I told you I was in the midst of like growing. I was on my path of finally feeling like I'm walking in my purpose, and then boom, smacked out of nowhere, and now I'm hurt. Now I get the metal rod put in my leg, the metal chip put in my hand, and I'm like, whoa, I want things to go back to before the accident. I like my lifestyle before, but now I have to embrace the new version of myself, and it's a little battle struggle. So give a little background of the story you shared with me, and then how you've come to deal with it over time.
Yeah, so when I was a senior in high school, I was in a really bad car accident, and I ended up breaking my femur as well, as you said you have done. And so I have a metal rod in my leg also. So thankfully I did do and if you're not doing all the physical therapy they're telling you to do, you have to do that. It's so important for your recovery. But for me, I missed the whole first half of my senior year of high school, and I was heartbroken about it. I wasn't mad that I couldn't go to school. That wasn't my issue, because I was on like a half day school anyway. It wasn't like, you know, that wasn't the bad part. I couldn't go to my senior homecoming. I couldn't hang with my friend. Like, well, that's not totally true. I couldn't hang with my friends the way I wanted to hang with my friends. My friends ended up starting to come to my house, and we would throw parties, and I was like in my wheelchair, like in the house. We were having parties or whatever, but it was just like not the experience I thought I was going to have my senior year of high school. But yeah, coping with a change, like a physical change like that, can be so hard emotionally. People think that like the physical and like getting back to walking and learning, like that's the hard part. The hard part is really like really learning how to walk, period. It's a mental, it takes so much mental power of being like, okay, yesterday I could just walk freely, and today I had to start in a wheelchair, and you know, next month I get to the crutches, and the month after that, you know, and it's like this progression, and it's kind of like, depending on how you look at it, I'm a glass half full kind of person. So I'm like, okay, look at you, girl. Like, you was in the wheelchair, then you was on the crutches, or with the walker, then you was on the crutches, and now you're on one crutch, now you got a cane. Like, okay, you're getting there. Sorry. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, okay, you're getting there. But also on the flip side, it's like, it's painful to go through the physical therapy. And then you're like in the physical therapy thinking like, oh my God, this hurts so bad. But, and it's been so long since I had my accident. It's been like 12 or 13 years at this point. But if my advice to you would be to kind of journal those feelings and kind of keep track of your progression. So keep track of those positive things, like, okay, today in physical therapy, I was able to do this. Or today, emotionally, I felt this way. And being grateful that you can walk, being grateful that, being grateful that you have both legs. The mental ride part of it, it really isn't, I don't even think about it. At this point. I forget that I have it there, because it doesn't go off in the airport. Nothing like that happens. Only time I think about it, this is really cold and rainy, I get achy.
Okay.
So like the only time I really think about it. So my encouragement to you as you recover, and to anybody recovering, is to think about all the things that you have to be grateful for, because it could have went another way. I was in an accident that was bad enough that if you saw the car, you would be like, how are you walking, period? Or like, how are you even here? And I remember vividly, like, that it was like an angel around me, protecting me during that time. Like, I was crying when the accident happened, but I was crying because my shoulder was out of place. And I was like in so much pain, like, oh my God, my shoulder. And I remember looking down at my leg, and the way I drive, I like have my hand under my leg most of the time when I drive. And I was driving like that, and so my hand was under my other hand was under my leg, and my shoulder was out of place. And I looked down, and I was like, oh my God, my leg is broken. But I wasn't crying because my leg was broken. I was crying because my shoulder hurt so bad. And they were cutting me out of the car, and I was like, oh my God, like, what is happening? But I just remember feeling this like angel, it just was like the grace of God covering me the whole time. And so I remember that feeling, like, and when I was going through the recovery process, I remember thinking of that, being like, your cousin died in a car accident. You could have died too. Like, she died her senior year of high school, and you could have too, and you didn't. You're here for a reason. And so just keeping those kind of things in mind when you're going through your recovery process, and just being grateful, and therapy, like mental health therapy, going through those process. I wish I would have went. I am always upset with my family that they did not put me in therapy sooner in life. That was another situation. I was like, wait, why don't you be like, okay, girl, like, maybe you can go talk to somebody, because you can't walk and you're missing your whole senior.
No,
Maybe
that's
you might
true.
want to talk to somebody. My family was not thinking about nothing.
It was the direct opposite in mine, where we always joked around, like in the black community, at least in my community, we joke around like, you need to go to therapy or something, like, but they just throwing it around nonchalant.
Yeah, nonchalantly, but
it was true.
And my family didn't really have an excuse not to know about therapy like that, because my mom has mental illness. She's been in the hospital. So I think their perspective of mental health was always that extreme. Like, if it wasn't something that extreme, then, what do you need to go to therapy for? And I'm projecting. I don't know that that's what they actually thought. I don't know. Or maybe they just didn't even think about it. And I think my aunt said one time she thought, one time my grandmother said, she thought about having me talk to somebody, but, they never followed through. But I think in the Black community, we think that it has to be so extreme. Like, it has to be, you're hearing voices, you have bipolar disorder, you were severely depressed, even severe depression, they might be like, okay, girl, pray it away.
Right.
But when something that extreme, and then that's okay. But when you seem like you're doing okay, and you seem like okay enough, they don't think nothing of it. So I don't know.
That was one.
And I agree. We do talk of being like, you need to go to therapy, and it being kind of a joke, and be like, some of us really need to go to therapy. Most of us do.
Most of us, I want to say majority, especially even at the basics.
I would say all of us.
All of us need to go because of slavery. At the core of it, we still haven't recovered from slavery.
And I just think that people should be. I say this all the time. People think I'm joking, but I think that just like you're born and you have a pediatrician, you should be, when you're able to talk, you should get a therapist. So you can be like, okay, this is what I got going on in my day, and I just want somebody else to care about it.
That's it.
That's it. But those kind of things I think are really important, just across the board. I know we started this about recovering from an injury, but just across the board, I think we need to take it more serious of when you have a major change in your life, you can seek a therapist
Mm-hmm.
just to deal with, even if it's moving or, there's some things that are like major changes in our lives that we don't consider the emotional impact
Mm-hmm.
of. An accident is definitely one. And I've been in more than one accident, but that was the most serious one.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm surprised that I don't have like a PTSD reaction to those kind of things. I don't, by the grace of God, I don't. But I know plenty of people who, my best friend still to this day doesn't drive. And she wasn't in the car with me when I had my accident, but she has anxiety, and she hurt the car she was in, pulled up right when
Oof.
right when my accident happened. So she saw the immediate
Oof.
impact. And so I don't know that that's always top of mind, but there's something she does bring up sometimes. And like, she does have anxiety about driving, and like, she's afraid of accidents and those kind of things. So you never know how those things can impact. It didn't give me, I was ready to drive like immediately. I was ready to get out the house. But for someone else, it's like, okay, I saw this thing happen to somebody else, and I'm afraid, afraid that could happen to me. So we have to take those things more seriously in our day-to-day life and make that a part of our self-care plan. Make therapy a part of your self-care plan. Go every week. If you can't go every week, go every 2 weeks. If you can't go every 2 weeks, go once a month. Like, whatever it takes to get you in there. Just make sure you're going if you need to, and talk to someone, especially when you have huge transitions in your life. It's so important.
Yeah, you said a lot. But I had both, where I was ready to get back out and drive, because mind you, I was a full capable entrepreneur, moving human being before it happened. So now going to fully dependable or dependent on people, it like just shook my world up.
Yep.
Now, I don't want to drive in the hood. I don't got time for little kids going out in the street, little teenagers walking in the middle of the street. Like I don't want to even drive nowhere where it's traffic or little things can happen to downtown Philadelphia. Like you said, the city. Like, I just don't even have like the time for it no more. So, and because my accident happened at what was that, at night, I don't even want to drive at night no more. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even want to drive at night. So I'm still feeling some type of action. And even if somebody get too close, I like don't want to be in the car. But that's neither here or there. We're gonna wrap up soon because I don't want to hold you too long. What is your overall viewpoint, perspective, just overall, just what you think about the Black mental health in the Black community, or mental health in the Black community?
My overall thought is, I'm so thankful that we are moving towards normalizing mental health conversations in the Black community. That's my overall thought. I'm so grateful that we can have a podcast about Black mental health, or that we have a podcast about Black mental health, that we're reaching out to. There's Black therapy for Black girls. There's what's the one for men? I can't remember.
Black Men Hill?
Yeah, Black Men Hill. There's all these aspects. It's not leaving anybody out. There's therapy for Black trans people. There's therapy, there's like all these different aspects, because we all have different experience. Even though we have the Black experience, we do also have our nuanced experience. So I'm so thankful that is what we're moving towards. I hope and I pray that we don't move away from that, and that we are having open and honest conversations about mental health and mental well-being, mental illnesses. And my hope is also that we get away from only focusing on the mental, how do I want to say this? I don't mean this literally, but I'm just saying the respectable mental illnesses. So depression, anxiety, the things that people are comfortable talking about, because we experience so much more than that. We experience PTSD, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, personality disorders. We don't talk about personality disorders in the Black community, but it's a huge thing. And we have Black people who are suffering from not only bipolar disorder, but they may also have borderline personality disorder as well, and like all these other kind of things that are going on that emotionally we need to be able to take care of. It's starting to rain, so it's
Sorry, we're gonna wrap up soon.
But I hope that we can get into deeper conversations within the Black community about all of the spectrum of mental health and mental well-being. So whether it's on the extreme of like, I don't necessarily need a therapist right now, but I need someone to be on my side. I need to have conversations about this. Or on the extreme of I've been hospitalized, I've had to take medication, or I take medication, and not seeing those things as right or wrong, and they just a part of the experience that you have in life. I hope that we get to a point that we can see that these are experiences people have in life, and this is things that go on in people's lives, and it doesn't make them right or wrong. If you meet a person and they have cut marks on their arm, that doesn't make them right or wrong for, wanting to feel something. Like it doesn't minimize anything about them. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Not looking at mental health as a thing that minimizes you in any kind of way. It's where I hope we move towards in the conversation about mental health and mental well-being. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Sort of what this platform is about. It's like what you said earlier when we first started talking. I didn't want to go to school to be a therapist, but I knew I've experienced mental health throughout my life, from being labeled a demon child by my grandmother because my father had visions, and she told my mom, don't have no more of them demon children because you're going to respawn it over and over. So from birth, this was proclamated over my life.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want to go into the counseling. I just knew I wanted to have conversations. Just open up the dialogue. If we get to that point, or if you want to get to that point of going to therapy and actually, which I've experienced through Black Men Hill, that's good. But starting to igniting the fire with that igniting it so that we can have the conversation and starting to talk about it more, like you said. Last question: 3 self-care tips that people could do today to start right now.
Easy. Communicate your boundaries with your family member. Well, okay. Identify your boundaries for yourself is the first thing. Communicate those with your friends and family. And then last, make sure that you're creating a self-care plan for yourself to go through. So think about what you want to do to refill yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all of the above, and making sure that we take the time to take care of ourselves every single day, not just, once in a while. So those are my tips.
Okay. I want to say thank you for coming on, Tish.
Thank you.
I appreciated it that we got it done. Everybody follow her on social media. She's a great follow. You're probably gonna see us around together. We finally crossed paths, so now I'm pretty sure it's gonna happen more often now. So follow her, everything that she's doing. I'm watching from afar. I salute you and everything that you're working on and helping the community. And guys, on that note, subscribe. Thank you guys for listening. And remember that this platform has never been about replacing therapy. It's an alternative, and it's a place where people share therapeutic stories. Thank you for listening.